the book, The Buddha on Wall Street. What's wrong with capitalism and what we can do about it. So, a bit of background. In 1996, at the age of 47, I wrote to Sangharakshita to request ordination. And in my letter, not email, in my letter, I talked about how we had something in common, because both of us as boys were forced to spend 2 years bedridden. But I also talked to him about how my life was very different, because for 25 years I had been involved in British trade unions. And very soon after, I got a typewritten, signed reply, very kind reply, from Sangharakshita. And he told me something that I think is not widely known. What he told me was this: if he had returned from the East at the end of the Second World War to England, instead of staying on and going to India, if he had returned to England, it was quite possible that through his uncle, he would have taken up a position in the trade union and cooperative movement in England. So try to imagine Urgyen Sangharakshita as a trade union and cooperative movement official. I find it very hard. But I thought that was really interesting, a side of Bhante's life that not many of us know about. And of course he wrote in the letter, as you know, things turned out rather differently. So there's a snippet there for you about Bhante. You know something now that not many people know. I wrote again to Bhante in 1998 with a copy of a Mitra study project I had done on the Vimalakirti Nadesha Sutra. And the study was led by Padmavajra, and I remember Padmavajra looking at me in complete astonishment when I said I wanted to write about Pure Land Buddhism and communism. And he couldn't figure out how I was going to do it. So I wrote a paper that compared the notion of a Pure Land with a vision of a socialist utopian world. I sent this to Bhante, and he wrote back and he said, I read it with great interest. He didn't say much more, probably because I had made the socialist utopian vision sound much more attractive than the Pure Land. So after that, I think I wisely decided that I needed to learn more about the Dharma. So I immersed myself in the Dharma for another 14 years before I returned to an attempt to integrate my understanding and practice of Buddhism with my time as a trade union and political activist and as an economist. But I mention Bhante because without Bhante, I would not be a Buddhist, and there would be no Buddha on Wall Street. And I say that because what hooked me into Triratna were cassette tape recordings of talks given by Sangharakshita, and in particular talks, first of all, where he talked about evolution. I was very much interested in popular science and very keen on evolution, so I was astonished to find a religious teacher who talked about evolution. And Bhante also talked about something that I didn't know about previously, the Axial Age. That concept written about by Karl Jaspers, the German philosopher, about how between 800 and 200 BCE there arose in different parts of the world new wise individuals. So we had the Hebrew prophets, the Greek philosophers, we had the Buddha in India, Confucius in China, and so on. And this, I thought, was astonishing. What I felt coming from Sangharakshita was a long-term perspective on evolution of the species, of evolution of culture. And I combined that in my mind with my interest in economics. Having been trained as an economist, I wondered about the economic conditions that led or that allowed the emergence of the wise men of the Axial Age. Because if you think about it in relation to the Buddha, he and other holy wanderers in northern India were freed from any kind of manual work to concentrate on spiritual practice and teaching, because they were given food and sometimes shelter. It was provided for them, which meant that there had to be an economic surplus, that more was being produced by fewer people. Otherwise, it would not have been possible for there to be sufficient time for people to reflect and to gain wisdom. So this is the background to the book, The Buddha on Wall Street. This interaction between evolution of the species, evolution of culture, and economics and Buddhism. And in the book, I argue that a critical issue, a really critical issue in the playing out of this interaction of evolution, culture, and economics is the struggle between the forces of greed and the forces of altruism. The Buddha taught us, didn't he, that there are three root poisons: greed, hatred, and delusion. We are born with these three root poisons. But he also taught us that we are born with the potential for the opposite qualities of generosity, loving kindness, compassion, and wisdom. So we have two competing sets of potential. And which set of potential wins is crucial, not just for our personal enlightenment, but in a very real sense is crucial for the future of humanity and the future of our planet. That's what I firmly believe at the present moment. So this is why I wrote The Buddha on Wall Street. I'm not going to take you through the book in detail, but I want to highlight just two things in the book that I write about that came to my mind and have stayed in my mind since I wrote the book. And the first is a point put forward by an economist who is now quite obscure, a man called E.J. Mishan, who wrote a book in the 1960s called The Costs of Economic Growth. He was very much a lone voice, the costs of economic growth. And in that book he wrote, the precondition of sustained growth is sustained discontent. The precondition of sustained growth is sustained discontent. Economic growth depends upon people having their minds and bodies manipulated so that they are never satisfied with what they have. And this, I think, is a truly vital insight into our current situation. It leads to a situation where we and all people are being pressured to always want more through advertising and other means. And it leads to what in the book I call the attention economy, but what others call, I think also in a very good phrase, the age of distraction, where every minute of every day and even of every night, our minds can be bombarded with distractions designed to engage us in consuming this or that good or service. The space and time simply to do nothing is rapidly disappearing. This means that establishing space for us to practice the third positive precept with stillness, simplicity, and contentment becomes really vital, not just for our own personal practice, but something that we must actively promote within our wider society as a source of deeper happiness and fulfillment. Fighting for space to allow stillness, simplicity, and contentment is vital. That's the first thing. The second thing I wish to highlight is related to that search for happiness. And it's three related points actually made by the Greek philosopher Epicurus, not by a Buddhist, but it has a lot of resonance with Buddhism, and in particular, I think, it has a lot of resonance with our own Triratna Buddhist tradition. Epicurus believes that we make three fundamental mistakes in thinking about happiness. The first is that we put too much emphasis on romantic relationships and not enough on friendships. Isn't it great that somebody else argued that a long time ago? Too much emphasis on romantic relationships and not enough on friendships. Second, Epicurus argued, we are obsessed by money and careers instead of seeking meaningful and satisfying work either on our own or in small groups with other people, thus obtaining fulfillment through our work and labor. A vision of work as a source of fulfillment, either on our own, maybe as a craftsperson, or with others, so that we learn and practice with others. Again, a strong resonance with our own tradition. And thirdly, and I find this really interesting, I've thought a lot about this, Epicurus said, we dream of luxury. But behind that dream of luxury, Epicurus thought that what we really want is a life of calm with time to reflect and time to be with a good listener. Isn't that great? We dream of luxury, but behind that dream of luxury is a desire for a life of calm with time to reflect and time to be with a good listener. So I hope, if you read the book, that you will find that the Buddha on Wall Street is not just an account of what's wrong with capitalism, but also gives you ideas for how to build an alternative to go beyond our current economic system. And although I don't usually promote myself, I'm going to now. I'm going to read you what Bhikkhu Bodhi says about the book. And there's a story behind this. I wrote a first draft of the book. And I looked around and I thought, who should I send a first draft of this book to who might have something interesting to say? And I'd never had any contact with Bhikkhu Bodhi. And I wrote to him and I sent a first draft of the book. And I didn't hear anything for a month or so, and I thought, that's fine. He's a very, very busy man. And then I got a reply, and he was incredibly enthusiastic, very enthusiastic. Not only that, he had carefully gone through the book, looking at all the references to the Pali Canon, and gently but firmly correcting me where I had made mistakes in how I presented what had happened in the Pali Canon. So his generosity to me has been incredible. And he very kindly wrote this about the book, and this is where I'm going to finish. Because I think he's saying something very important. Western Buddhism has a choice about which path it follows. Is it a path purely of personal practice and fulfillment, or is it a path that turns outwards as well towards others? This is what he wrote. Many Western Buddhists regard Buddhism as primarily a path to personal insight and inner peace, thus as a virtual escape route from the madness of the modern world. Yet deep within the Dharma are the seeds for a new vision of human relatedness, a web of ideas about how our social and economic systems can promote authentic well-being rather than the oppression, violence, and exploitation so widespread today. Vaddhaka, in this book, boldly uses the lens of Buddhism to closely examine the dominant structures of corporate capitalism. He lays bare the pernicious consequences of these structures and draws forth from the Dharma its suggestions for creating benign alternatives conducive to true human flourishing. This book helps us to better see the Dharma as a comprehensive message that has much to offer to the emergent global community in its broadest dimensions. It should also help Buddhists to understand more clearly the potential relevance of Buddhism to the crises of our age. So I hope that the book does live up to what Bhikkhu Bodhi thinks of it. And I hope that you will read it, and I would very much appreciate feedback and discussion with people in the future. It's on sale at the back from the Berlin Buddhist Center bookshop. I think it's at €12.95. It's a very good buy, and if you ask me kindly, I will sign the book for you, and of course that means it will be worth a huge amount in the future. So I notice how I'm skillfully using capitalist methods to promote the book. So I do hope you enjoy it.